part. Tell us what we're going to talk about in politics.
Yeah, so we usually call this the politics section, but we're going to call it the news and politics section because I generally, when I talk about shootings, I don't like calling it politics. Yeah. Because that's how you have people moving into their corners and not being able to have a proper discussion about things. So we're going to start with a couple of shootings that happened over the past 2 weeks now. First is one that's a little closer to home for both of us. Is the shooting in Atlanta. There's a 21-year-old male that went to 3 massage parlors and killed 8 people in the shooting. 6 of them were Asian or of Asian descent, and I think there was 1 Hispanic and 1 white victim as well.
1 white victim, and there's something crazy about the white victim too, which we'll discuss a little bit, which is her husband. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Or her husband. Okay. So real quickly, like you said, the majority of it were Asian, right? Because this was massage parlors, and the majority of massage parlors are usually employed by Asian women or Asian individuals. But so when the white lady who was killed was actually married to a Mexican man or a Hispanic man, and during when the police first got there, they put him in handcuffs because they said, we don't know if you're a suspect or a victim. Yeah. Which I'm like, I'm guarantee you there was other people there that could easily be the suspect, but they weren't handcuffed. So, and they actually didn't want to tell. They didn't even let him know that his wife was had gotten killed. Damn. During his, so he was, I think he was in handcuffs for 2 hours. So, anyways, yeah. Damn. So, yeah. But I'm sure that leads into the whole discussion about
Yeah. So I mean, every shooting is sad and tragic. What made this one even more so, and what made this one get like a lot of headlines is it seemed like it was targeted specifically towards Asians, right? And when you hear this, I mean, if you've not been living under a rock for the past year and a half, just past year, that there's been a lot of like rhetoric that's like not very Asian friendly, let's put it that way. From some high levels of our political system, not least of which was the former president, saying things like Kong flu, the China virus, those kind of things to refer to COVID-19. And there's been a rise of these incidents, people getting punched in the subway, people getting yelled at and spat on, those sort of things, right? And those kind of incidents, they'll get play here and there. Like we might see like an article of it here and there, but they don't get national headlines, not like this, because this became like real, that people got shot. Of course, part of the conversation was also around the fact that the shooter was a white male. The shooter was brought in unharmed. And then the sheriff or the police officer, when he was explaining what had happened, had used the term, had used the phrase he had a bad day.
And not in the officer's defense, because he still sounded as if he was defending him or at least sympathetic towards him, right? Yeah. When in these kind of cases, you shouldn't be sympathetic towards the person who was the perpetrator, maybe be sympathetic towards the victims, or at least make sure your words speak to that, right? He was repeating what he said though, because he said he apparently he had a bad day. Meaning apparently he said he had a bad day. But it just, all right, if you're gonna repeat the words, you still should know how to repeat them to make it not sound like you are an agreement, like, yeah, you just had a bad day, bro.
Right, but also the other thing that a lot of people were saying, and I agree with, is that how many times have you heard them say that, well, this, let's say it's a black person that committed the crime. Well, he said he was just having a bad day or whatever. For me, it doesn't matter that he was repeating what the guy said. First of all, it's tone deaf anyway. But it's like, so you're gonna listen to the guy over everything that's happened, right? Because
I mean, Dylan Roof got a hamburger on the way to
yeah,
they
got him Burger King,
yeah.
after he went and shut up a church in South Carolina. So I can see why people were mad about the whole he had a bad day thing.
Yeah.
I the other thing that gets me is when people were talking about, well, this is a hate crime because he targeted Asians, and then people were like, well, no, the guy said that he was it's a sexual depravity thing, right? Like he thinks that this is a place where they do sexual acts, and this guy had issues with that, and like so you want to shut up the place, so that's why he killed them. First of all, why are you taking the victim's word? I'm sorry, the murderer's word for it? That's first. And secondly, what does it matter? Like this guy has, I don't know, man. This is a really hard one.
Well, even if that's the case, his sexualization of Asian women is racist in the root.
Yeah, it's rooted in racism.
It is, because it's the whole idea of Asian women being, exotic, but not just that, but also being submissive, because there's that stereotype of that. So even that's that guy's racist. And you know what I hated during this? So I got caught up in the whole thing at the and I ended up sharing that photo of where it was supposed to be his Facebook, and he talked about, this and that, where it ended up being false, right? The news even said it was false. I guess it got so big that even the news had to be like, no, this isn't real. This is a fake. So basically him talking, honestly, it sounded like Trump word for word about blaming Asian China for our cause for the coronavirus, right? And I ended up sharing that. So I got called out for it being false, and I'm like, all right, I'll take that L. But then the problem that I had was it became about, it ended up being about, you are arguing that, oh, we need to wait for him, for all the facts to come out, right? And it becomes kind of one of those things. Is like you give them the benefit of the doubt, and it becomes where you defend it. You argue against it being a hate crime versus it actually being a crime. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you're outraged that it's being called a hate crime because, and what I mean by you, and look, this is what it ends up being, because I ended up having one of my friends reach out to me and say, you sound racist, because I was saying, because you end up talking about white people, right? Quote, white people. Mm-hmm. Woke white people know that we're not talking about them, right? Yeah. It is a generalization.
We're not talking about non-racist whites. We're talking about racist
and
whites.
not only that, but we're not talking about white people who are that may not be racist, but they subconsciously always defend racism.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Like, you don't necessarily have to be racist outright, calling this person an N-word and hating Hispanics and all that, but you can still perpetrate and push up racist ideas.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so, and that's the argument that ends up, like, you end up getting, it's like you're not even arguing about the fact that this was a terrorist act. You're arguing against it, like, well, it wasn't a hate crime. It was
exactly
a Spanish crime.
When the first thing you think about is, how do I dispel the notion that this was based on racism? When that comes to your mind first, before that, hey, we need to make sure that we're not treating our Asian citizens or citizens of color. Let's call it what it is. We're not treating other races as a lower class. When that is trumped by, oh, I want to make sure that people don't mistake this for racism, there's a problem there. Why is your guard automatically up when people want to talk about this?
And the fact of the matter is, hate crimes against Asian Americans has gone up.
Yeah.
In some places, it's
documented.
It's gone up, I think, 300% in some areas.
Yeah, it's actually documented.
And the thing is, though, even if this particular wasn't the hate crime based against Asians, the fact that it brought what's been happening to the forefront, is a terrible coincidence at the least. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it just seems like sometimes it kind of becomes where you and I, as people of color, have to argue against, hey, these don't represent all the people of color. I can get that idea. I can get that whole where you're talking about white terrorists. You're talking about me. No, the thing is that we're talking about white domestic terrorists, people who actually commit crime, which is one of the biggest dangers in this country.
Yeah, and I don't know, man. Like so one of those ZZ features that we did was with Ali Fick, and I'm sure you remember it. My old classmate, and we had talked about this, about why it's so hard to have these conversations about institutional racism and the fact that it exists, right? Like why do some white people shut down the conversation before you can even begin? And I mean, she said that because to acknowledge that it exists is almost to acknowledge that you might in some way
benefit from it.
No, be responsible for it in some way, you know? And so for them to acknowledge that this, anti-Asian hate exists, they have to acknowledge some responsibility. It doesn't mean that, I specifically went and called an Asian something, or I threw something at an Asian also. But it does mean that maybe by being indifferent to it before, you've kind of helped it, you kind of fostered it, But until people can get out of their own heads with that and not calling everything like the idea that if you point out racism, that makes you a racist. I can't fathom that. Like if I see someone raping someone and I call them a rapist, now I'm a rapist for calling the rapist a rapist. How does that make sense? So
if somebody says that you're racist for calling out racism, really what's happening is that person is fighting their own conscience. Yeah. That's really what's going on. They're fighting their own conscience because they're afraid that they might have to get real with themselves and realize, like, yeah, I might not be a perpetrator of this, but I most likely have benefited from this. Me and you are pretty, I guess we don't look as threatening, I would assume, even though I'm a big dude. But, if I go to a store, I'm not always going to be followed. Right? Yeah. I'm not always going to be looked at suspiciously, but I can go to a store and be looked at suspiciously because of my skin color, because of my ethnicity. Same thing with you, even though, you know what I mean? Like it happens more. I was told when I was working in retail, one time some guy got upset at me and he said, "Don't come at me with that. Go back to Guadalajara with that attitude." And I'm like, these things can be thrown out at you. It's very rare that it gets thrown out at somebody of who's not of color, because I know, one thing that people like to go to, a lot of people like to use it as an excuse. Well, I can't go to a black neighborhood, right? I was like, yeah, but you can't go to a certain neighborhood because that neighborhood might be dangerous and they will attack you, right? Whereas a person of color can't go to certain particular neighborhoods, not because they're a threat, but because people feel, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like you're going to be called. The police is going to be called on you just because you're walking down the street, and not because you look suspect.
And I do want to touch on that whole I can't go to a black neighborhood thing. I think people mistake danger that's due to people wanting to rob you or whatever, with danger that's just due to I hate you because you are a certain way.
Yeah.
The former is based on poverty. When someone who is poor and sees that you have something, and they're like, well, the only way I can get it is through crime, they will commit a crime to get it from you. It just so happens that most neighborhoods that are poverty stricken are also full of minorities. Yeah. So you might be like, I can't go to a black neighborhood. No, you can't go to a poor black neighborhood.
You can't go to a poor black neighborhood. You can go to an affluent neighborhood,
right?
With the majority of the people are minorities. There. By the way, there are those.
Those
in Atlanta. There's a lot of affluent places that are filled with nothing but minorities.
Those places exist. So someone using a phrase like that is very misguided. But then it's not the same thing as a black person saying I can't go to to a white neighborhood for fear of being like hurt or whatever. Because if that were the case, it's not because it's just white people wanting to rob you because you're rich. No, it's because they don't like you because you're black, and they mean like, no, what are you doing here? Get out of here.
Yeah, boy. You don't belong.
Yeah. So before we get off of the I mean, and this is a larger topic. We just wanted to address it because it was closer to home. I've learned a lot about um, the history of anti-Asian hate, because it's very easy to be like, oh, this just started under Trump and Trump saying this and that. No, it's gone a long time. Yes, he did stoke those fires, but it's been going on a while. So I've learned a lot over the past couple of weeks from friends and stuff sending me articles. But before we leave the topic, I do want to share this thing that you had posted about.
Yeah.
This.
So it's and I actually got it from HuffPost Politics, if I'm not mistaken. So so those of you who are listening to the podcast, what it is it's a meme, I guess, or just a photo that it has "Stop Asian Hate," right, which was something that was being passed around on Facebook. People were changing their profile pics to have "Stop Asian Hate" in it, right? And then what they did is they crossed out "Stop Asian Hate" and put "Stop White Terrorism." And I when I posted this on Facebook, I said, at first I was like, okay, whatever. I was like, okay, yeah, definitely, we got to stop white terrorism. And of course, we don't mean white people are terrorists, but they're talking about is domestic terrorism that seems to be perpetrated by white males on the most part, right? And then when I actually kept thinking about it and looking at some of the comments from the Asian commenters, right? It started to give me all lives matter kind of feel. You know what I mean? Like it was no at this moment. Yeah, domestic white terrorism is an issue, right? Domestic terrorism is an issue.
Yeah.
But at this moment, the same way last summer was a highlight of Black Lives Matter, not quote all lives matter, because saying all lives matter means, oh, we all have to deal with, yeah, we all deal with hate, but at this moment, we're seeing an unprecedented amount of Black individuals, specifically Black males, getting unjustly killed by police officers, right? That's what Black Lives Matter came out. At this moment, it is about stopping Asian hate, because at this current moment, we have to highlight that, because that is a big problem that we're currently having. It's a pandemic in and of itself at this moment, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, yeah, I'm not feeling this. I'm really not feeling this. And you came back with a really good point of like, yeah, I don't see the reason why we have to cross out Stop Asian Hate. Why can't we just do both?
We can do both, yeah. By crossing out Stop Asian Hate, it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna let you finish, but we should stop white terrorism. Yeah, it's like it's just another example of taking our eye off the ball when someone is coming and saying that, hey, look, I'm hurting, this is going on, and you're like, okay, thanks, bye. Like I'll put my hand on your face and then say, okay, but here is the bigger issue. Now we know the Asian hate, at least in this particular case, was a function of white terrorism, but don't minimize their plights to elevate another message, right? Like that's not great. And I almost said something wrong just now. I almost said we know Asian hate is because of white terrorism. Not true, because there is a lot of Asian hate going on that's perpetrated by Black people. I don't know about Hispanic people, but I know it's perpetrated by Black people. I think, in fact, there was a story 2 days ago of this guy beating up this lady
in New York.
I don't know if it was in New York, but it was like outside the store. The security guard in the store closed the door instead of going out to help.
I saw that one too. I believe it was in New York. Yeah, and he was kicking her in the stomach and yelling Asian slurs. And she was an older woman. She was like in her 60s.
Yeah, and I believe that was a Black guy from the pictures. I'm not sure, but the point is, Asian hate isn't solely a white people problem. Yes, white supremacy is a big problem.
It's our country's problem.
Yes, white supremacy is a big problem, and we have to deal with it. But we, as people of other ethnicities, shouldn't just like sit back and feel virtuous and be like, "Hey, we aren't doing this." Yeah, we are. We're part of it. We've been ignoring it. It's got to stop all around. So,
and I think among minorities, there needs to be a discussion about getting past our issues, because you have the same thing where you have you've seen videos of Black kids beating up the ice cream guy who's walking around with this thing and a lot of it isn't to rob it. A lot of it is just to beat him up, right?
Yeah, all of it is
Vendors are getting their stuff thrown down and all that stuff. So it's one of those things where there has to be a discussion among minorities, right? But right now, the concentration needs to be about this problem where we're having where Asian individuals are being targeted unjustly by unstable people. These are all unstable people, right? Like a normal person is not going to do this. A normal person is not going to beat somebody up because they think COVID-19 is caused by Asian people, right? You know what I mean? The same way that it wasn't normal people or stable people, I should say, who were shooting people with wearing the turbans right after 9/11, even though people wearing the turbans tended to be Buddhists, not Muslims.
All this did, like all the whole Kung Flu thing did, the China virus, is give people a reason to act on their, on their aggression, to act on the evil within them,
and find somebody to blame.
Yeah, it's always in there, but now they're like, okay, now I can beat up this person and feel like I have justification for it, right? So yeah, those bad people are always there. They just now feel justified. Okay. So the next thing we want to talk about,
real quickly before we move on, we just want to say to all the 8 individuals who were murdered during this time, and obviously we're about to go back and we're going to go into another discussion about gun violence. So everybody who's been affected, our condolences go out to those families. And it's just, it sucks. Zino could speak on if here, even I know this is not normal in our country.
Yeah.
This is not normal we're the worst country when it comes to this, where we have so many mass killings from guns and from domestic terrorism. It's just, it's horrible, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly not normal. And yeah, I echo what you say. Condolences to those families affected by gun violence, especially, no, I don't want to make it just a gun violence issue, because this particular segment was about Asian hate. So to those who feel who have been targeted, know that we're listening. We may not have been listening before. We're watching, we're listening, and we'll do better.